If you're asking yourself, what's an appraisal? How does it work? And what's the significance of an appraisal towards my real estate transaction? Then hopefully this video will answer some of those questions, because that's exactly what I'm going to go over. Now, if you have bought or sold real estate, or you are going to be buying or selling real estate that includes a mortgage, chances are you will also be subject to an appraisal. Now, an appraisal is nothing more than an unbiased opinion of real property. It's a report that is done by a third party that helps someone understand exactly how much a particular home is worth, because every home is different. Even if you live in the same community and your house is the same size as your neighbor, chances are there's still a variance in value for different reasons. Now, one question I get asked all the time is, Chris, who pays for the appraisal? Well, the buyer pays for the appraisal, and usually they pay for the appraiser before the appraiser even goes out. The loan officer is going to collect anywhere between $450 to $600. Now, that's for your average or your traditional real estate appraisal here in the greater Philadelphia area. It could be more, it could be less, depending the home. And again, if you're outside of this market, then you're probably going to want to talk to your loan officer or your realtor to get a better understanding of what it might cost you. But the buyer does pay for it, and it's non-refundable. So if the deal doesn't work out or the value doesn't come in at where it needs to be, unfortunately, that is cost of doing business, and the buyer is not going to get that money back, nor is the seller responsible for reimbursing the buyer for the money that they paid for an appraisal. Now, the purpose of the appraisal is actually to protect both the buyer and the lending institution. If you're buying a product, one thing you want to do, or one thing you want to know is it worth the money that I'm spending? If you're buying a home and you're offering someone $300,000 for the home, I'm pretty sure you want to make sure that the house is worth at least what you're offering or more. And that's exactly what an appraisal does. And same thing, if you are lending $300,000 to someone to buy a home, you would want to make sure that the home that they're buying is worth at least $300,000, because in the event they don't pay you and you need to get your money back, well, the only way to do that is by taking back the asset, which is the house that you would then need to sell. And by you, I mean you lending the money to someone buying the home, right? So again, the appraisal is put in place to protect not only the buyer, but to protect the lending institution as well. Now, depending the type of loan that the buyer is using is going to determine the type of appraisal. If your buyer has a conventional loan product, then they're going to have a conventional appraisal. If they have an FHA or a VA, then they're going to have an FHA or a VA appraisal. Whatever the loan product is justifies or determines the type of appraisal. Now, some appraisers or some types of appraisals are a little bit more challenging than others. For example, FHA, VA, and USDA appraisals very well may warrant some repairs. The appraiser may say the house is worth what the buyer's paying, but only after certain repairs are made. Conventional loans or conventional appraisals generally don't warrant repairs, but they can. But for the most part, the other three very well may. Moral of the story is that all the different types of loan products will require a different type of appraisal. And those different types of appraisals will also require either more or less comps. An FHA appraisal compared to a conventional appraisal generally will have more information, or more comps, I should say, simply because of how the appraisal is done and the request from underwriting. So not to confuse you, just know that there are several different types of appraisals, and some of them are easier than others. Plain and simple. Now, one thing I want to go back to is the word unbiased. A lot of times the buyer or the seller, they get concerned because they're wondering whether or not there's anything funny going on. Now, years ago, appraisals were actually ordered and handled a lot different. But to give you an idea of how the appraisal process works, once the buyer pays the lender, the loan officer, whoever it may be, for the appraisal, the loan officer orders the appraisal, or the lending institution orders the appraisal. But here's the thing. The lending institution doesn't call their friend, or they don't call an appraisal company that they have this relationship with, because one could then create the argument that the appraisal is fixed. That's not an unbiased opinion if you are hiring your friend or someone you know who may have a vested interest to do the appraisal. So once the request for the appraisal goes out, the lender doesn't have much control on who picks the appraisal up or who the actual appraiser is going to be. A lot of times they don't know that information until the appraiser accepts it and then starts to make contact with the realtors, the lenders, and so forth. But at no point in the transaction does the buyer have the ability to say, I want this person specifically or this company specifically to do the appraisal, because as I mentioned, that's not unbiased and it leaves a lot of room or a lot of doubt as to whether or not the appraisal is even accurate. When it comes to the appraised value, several things impact appraised value. The number one thing that will impact your value is your location. Real estate is extremely hyper-local. So things such as the township in which the house is located, school districts, subdevelopments, and even how the home may be positioned on its lot. And what I mean by that is, does the home face something that is favorable or not favorable? Does the house face a lot of traffic or does the house face waterfront? Obviously, if the house faces traffic versus a house that faces waterfront, the house that faces the waterfront is going to have a higher value simply because it has a higher view. So things such as location, condition, size, and amenities are generally what an appraiser is going to look at for the most part. Those are the things that they're going to put adjustments on to help bring some clarity, to help balance out the equation, if you will. For example, if your home is 100 square feet larger than a home that an appraiser is using as a comparable, your home is superior in size. The appraiser is going to need to put an adjustment on that to figure out exactly how much is that 100 square feet worth and put an adjustment on that so that when it's compared to another home, they could say, okay, if both of these homes were the same size, we would need to put an adjustment on to make that happen. What would the value be? Or if your home is not as nice, doesn't have as many upgrades as a home that just sold in the development a month ago, an appraiser is going to take a look at that and they're going to put an adjustment on the property for the condition. So if the house that you're buying is not as nice or it's inferior to the house that just recently sold, they should be putting a negative adjustment on that superior home so that, again, the values are uniform. So now that you understand some of the things that will impact the value of the appraisal, some of the things to also know is that for the most part, an appraiser is going to need to find 3 homes that recently sold, as well as 3 homes that are either currently on the market or currently under contract. And they want to do that to get an idea of which direction is the market going. If the homes that are currently listed are more than the homes that sold, that paints the picture that the market is appreciating. Homes are going up in value, not down in value. So then the opposite would be if the active homes or the homes that are available are less than the homes that have recently sold, then the opposite, right? The market is actually depreciating or declining in value. So to give you an idea of why it's important to have both sold and active comps in the report, that's exactly why. And all the homes that the appraiser uses should also be what I refer to as apple-to-apple comparables. They should be in the same market. They should be of similar design, they should be of similar size, and also offer, within reason, the same amount of bedrooms and bathrooms. All of the homes in the report should appeal to a similar buyer. Now, I've learned that there are also some misconceptions about what an appraisal is. Sometimes buyers or sellers have actually thought that an appraisal is an inspection. And let me tell you that it is not. The sole purpose of an appraisal is to determine value. Some forms of an appraisal, FHA, VA, or USDA, which will look for safety-related items, may warrant repairs. So in the back of your mind, you may think that it's an inspection, but it's not. The purpose of this is to determine value. And if you are a buyer, you should not be relying on your appraiser to do an inspection. Whether you're an FHA or a VA, USDA, conventional, or a cash buyer, I would always encourage for you to have a home inspection conducted by an actual home inspector. A home inspection and an appraisal are not in any which way, shape, or form, regardless the type of an appraisal being done. Another misconception is that appraisals will always align with market value. Keep in mind that even though this is supposed to be an unbiased opinion, there's always room for error. Now, this next section is for you, the homeowner, someone preparing the home for the appraisal. And although you are preparing the home for the appraisal, this is one part of the real estate transaction where it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're the loan officer, the buyer, the seller, or any of the realtors involved. Everyone involved in the transaction wants one thing: the appraisal to come in at or above value without repairs. But if you are the one who owns the home, then you're the one who would want to prepare the home so that it looks the best for the appraiser. So if you're going to have an appraisal done on your home, obviously clean the house up as much as you possibly can. Look for things that an appraiser may question. Are there space heaters plugged in? Are there extra floor fans laying around? Are there windows that are being supported by things that, well, a window just shouldn't be supported by? A window should be self-supporting. If you lift it up, it should stay up until someone puts it down, okay? But go through your home and look for things that could raise an eye and correct them to the best of your ability. Also, I like to have my clients put together an appraisal package and leave that package for the appraiser. And in that package, I encourage for them to put things such as anything that they've done to the home recently, add those receipts, or maybe even do a little bullet list of things that the appraiser should note that were recently done in the property. We also encourage, which really is going to be more on the realtor, but we want our sellers to include it in that package, which are going to be some things like comparable homes that are either available or recently sold that we think support our value. We also will put things in there that would highlight the community. If you live in a community where there's a lot of progressive things going on, put that in there as well because, well, again, an appraisal is somewhat judgmental, and that could be something that appraiser finds value in. So again, clean up the best you can. Look for things such as space heaters or floor fans or anything that could create questions regarding functionality, and do your best to put together some things to help the appraiser say, these are things I should note in this appraisal. These are things that will help me get those numbers up. So now that the appraiser has come to the property, they've put their report together and they've turned it into the lender, now you realize that the value is either at or above, or hopefully it has not come in under the appraised value, because that's where things get a little bit challenging. If you don't have an appraisal contingency in your transaction, well, you may need to come to the table with money out of pocket, and no one wants to do that. But let's assume that you did have an appraisal contingency, or it was an FHA loan or a VA loan where they're contingent upon a successful appraisal and the value came in low. This is where you want to work with your realtor or pull the comps that you used when you were trying to figure out how much your house was worth when you listed it, put that together and question the appraiser and say, why didn't you use these homes in comparison to the ones you did use? Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, your comps that you're giving the appraiser have to be within reason. They have to be apple to apple comparables, meaning they have to be close to your home. They have to be within the same school district. They should be the same design and offer similar amenities, because if not, an appraiser is going to make some adjustments or simply rule them out because they wouldn't appeal or apply to a similar buyer. But you do have the right, so long as you have the resources, to question that appraisal and try to get the value up. So whether you're buying or selling a property, if it involves or includes a mortgage, I should say, it's going to have an appraisal. And with the market changing, I do think that we're going to start to see some more questionable or low appraisals. And it's going to be up to you and your real estate team to know how to navigate those scenarios. So if you have any questions, or if I can be of any value to you or your appraisal situation, let me know. There's a link in the comments that will allow for you to carve out 15 minutes with me. And if you're questioning how much your home is worth, there's a link in the description for that as well, because I can actually help you get an idea of how much your house is worth before the appraiser even gets there. And if you're a buyer, don't worry, I didn't leave you out. Feel free to download our free home buyer guide. There is a link in the description for that as well. And until next time, I'm Chris Nelson, the team lead of the Nelson Home Group, helping buyers and sellers achieve their real estate goals here in the greater Philadelphia area. Until next time, take care.